Return to the Source, African Origins, with Dr. Asa G. Hilliard III, the Fuller E. Callaway Professor of Urban Education at Georgia State University. Any farmer will tell you that if you plant weed in a vegetable garden, you shouldn't be surprised at a poor harvest. So it is with people. Various types of weed have been planted in the minds of African Americans. But unlike the farmer, the larger society expects a bountiful harvest. The larger society seems to have suffered a convenient loss of memory. Dr. Hilliard takes us back to the not-too-distant past to show us how we arrived at the present.
Now, when you got to the point where black people didn't do right or weren't available, you could, it's a little hard to see this one because I can't see the whole poster here, but this is what's important about this poster is on the bottom. It comes from a catalog called Johnson Catalog. This is an actual page out of Johnson Catalog. In other words, it's nigger makeup, but it's where it comes from. This is something circulated all across the country. People could buy nigger makeup, white people could, burnt cork, paint their faces black, and then they could go out and imitate their images of black people or play roles in film of black people.
As a psychologist, what is that? What's at the base of that?
Well, it's a peculiar and twisted kind of identification as far as I can see it, and it's a projection of certain kinds of qualities that are inside the person who's doing this onto people. You remember I talked about projection of blame. It's another kind of projection, as I see it. I'm sure that clinical psychologists would have even deeper Freudian interpretations of this phenomenon. But it was pervasive, and it must have had some meaning, as you can see.
Okay.
For example, let's take what happens here. Now here's a white actor that's dressed up in burnt cork. But look at the role that he's playing, the same role that those black actors have been playing. You see, he's playing juxtaposed to the strong image of a white male. Here's this weak black male.
So this white actor.
That's the black person in that film is a white person in burnt cork. He's on the left, right? So this is what began to happen, and then of course Al Jolson made lots of money with his blackface routine, and most of the black actors could be background substitute and so forth. But what he did was to take it to another level, and do comedy routines based on these distorted black images. And so this, you remember Al Jolson and the Jazz Singer, so here again is a white person who has burnt cork, and he's dressed up and put into a position where he can now project an image of who we are. And there was not much that black people could do about this. You know, we just had to, we had to deal with it. But notice this, this is a very important fact. This developed into something called minstrelsy. In other words, whites who did this, I remember them as children, with black in their faces, and they're coming back, by the way. There are lots of new minstrels in the country. And you see the old minstrel shows being shown on TV, and you notice the exaggerated caricature of black people. This was the most popular form of entertainment in America for 50 years. So, anything that lasts for 50 years, you don't have soap operas, that even Dynasty doesn't last for 50 years.
Right.
But why the fascination with the distortion of the black image as the most popular form of entertainment for 50 years? I think that's a psychological phenomenon that deserves to be investigated. And of course, our psychologists have not turned their attention to the psychology of racism. It's a very little studied area, and it's an important area because it's a peculiar pathology. Now let's look at it again. Here you leave the movies and go to the radio. Turn on your radio. For 32 years, the most popular program on radio was Amos and Andy. Amos and Andy were created by two white actors, Freeman Gosden and Charles Correll. This is one of them here. And when they had been popular on radio for 32 years, then of course it was turned into a TV series, and then you had to have black actors. Well, the black actors had to play the parts of black people that had been invented by white people. So your question about the invention of the Negro. See, this character, Step and Fetch It, didn't exist anywhere on the continent of Africa. I've been there recently and never saw any people acting like that. Amos and Andy, the kinds of things that we're seeing here were not typical of Africans. They were the fabrications of the white mind at that time. And so here is, an example of that. Again, 32 years of Amos and Andy. And then notice that black actors now begin to get parts. But look at the black actor on the right. What he had to do in order to get his part, he now has to do what the white actors were doing.
Caricature of
a caricature. So you have the minstrel imitating the minstrel, and that's how they got work. The image of the black female was also distorted in the same way that the image of the black male was. Usually, the black female had to be fat, she had to be loud, she had to be bossy. And this is one of the Shirley Temple movies. That image never left. It's still here in the
So you're saying
TV.
that this was and is calculated?
Yeah. Well, it's both calculated, and after a period of time, it doesn't even have to be calculated anymore. If you grow up with these images and you become a TV producer, then these are the only images that you have to work with. In other words, then you're just drawing on memory, and no longer you have the results of calculation, but you no longer have to sit down and decide that I'm going to try to twist the image anymore. The twisted image is now the real image for you, and so that's what we have. There is a hunger in the minds of many white Americans for the images that they were raised with: Stephen Fetchits, Beulah, Vashti, you know, these kinds of early characters.
What was wrong with the real black image? What was wrong with it that made, quote, wrong with it?
Yes.
That made white Americans
avoid it?
Right, avoid it.
It was too powerful. It still is. It's too powerful. You know, and my own theory, and I wish I had some research to back it up, or others would get interested in these kinds of things. I think you have, it has to be of interest to people who are insecure. You know, when you look at the NBA and the NFL, and you look at the preponderance of the power images of black males, you know, I don't think that there's any accident that associated with that. The most popular TV programs are small black males, you know, like Different Strokes, you know, that they have these little boys that
Hansel, thank God.
Yes, yes. So I think it's worth, you know, that may not be. That may not be the explanation, but I just can't help but draw the association between those two things. I think that when you get into the history of black people, that history is so powerful that it definitely could not be handled by a population that had been trained to believe other things.
Well, that touches on this question, and that is, it's been said over and over again,
yeah,
that Koreans are able to come to the United States,
yeah,
and get ahead.
Yeah.
Japanese come here, get ahead.
Yes.
Italians come here, get ahead.
Yeah.
What is it, as a psychologist, what is it about the African American, the black man, woman, and child, that makes white America want to control his and her development? Do they know something that we don't know?
Well, I don't know. I know one thing. We're 30 million. So that, we're 30 million people out of the total population of the United States, which makes us the largest visible, quote, minority group in the country. And with unity and power, that represents competition. You know, and it is also true that as a continent, if we look at the continent of Africa, you have, you know, several hundred million people on the at least a couple hundred million people on the continent of Africa, with wealth and resources, and when awakened, would be a formidable competitor in everything that takes place in the world. And I think that people fear competition, and especially anyone who knows the history of the role that black people as a whole have played in the world. They have every right to respect the competitive and power capacity of black people to perform on the world stage.
Because here you had a situation in slavery time where the African was considered inferior.
Yes, that was an image that was created.
But on the other side, you institute laws forbidding him.
That's right.
To read.
That's right. Because he's so inferior.
Okay.
Right. Yes, yes. No, that was calculated.
Okay.
And we go back to the psychodynamics that I talked about earlier. Suppression of memory, suppression of identity.
Suppression of memory. Use the computer thing you used. I heard you use some time ago in history. Computer and programming and memory and that analogy.
I can't remember exactly what I said.
You don't remember how brilliant you were.
Thank you. No, I just, that in effect, that you can use the computer as an analogy, that if you can somehow empty the contents of the African mind, and of course, you can't really do that once people have things in their mind. So what you do is, for those who have the appropriate program, which means their own natural memories in their mind, they are either isolated, killed off, and you wait till they die out, whatever. And then the children receive a new program so that they don't know the old memories. And as a result of the new program, they behave inappropriately. And that's basically what happens to many of our children, because as a group we have taken very little of the initiative in determining the nature of the program. We make sure that our children have access to the programs that are provided, but we don't question the character of the program enough. And as a result, we lose a chance to rescue ourselves.
Even with education, do you see the kind of concern about what black children are being taught? Black parents that I know, most of them have this one thing in mind: I want my child to get a good education, without examining what good is.
That's right, and we make very poor judgments about what a good education is. See, for me, a good education would be like the one that Ron McNair got, the astronaut who blew up on the launch pad. He got a technical education. That is, he was a laser physicist. One of the most brilliant laser physicists in the world. That's what he was doing up there in the capsule, was a physics experiment. That's why he was going up there. But he never forgot who he was. For example, one of his hobbies was jazz music, our music. He liked it, and he played in a jazz band. Also a karate expert, 4th degree black belt in karate. Also in community service. In other words, he felt the sense of responsibility and obligation to his people. So to me, that represents a person with a good education. Now, you could have another person who could become a laser physicist who didn't have the sense of social responsibility to his community, who rejected his cultural forms and decided that to be a physicist meant that he had to adopt Western European culture and values. And I think that would be a miseducated black person. And we have a lot of that.
Now, what about the person who took his learning, his knowledge of physics, and used it for, quote, black people?
I think that's showing a sense of social responsibility.
Go ahead.
Every group of people would do that for itself. Every group of sane people would do that for itself.
Okay.
Well, let's just take a look at a few more of these. I go to the store, buy some tobacco, nigger hair tobacco. These are actual products that were sold in the store. I'm trying, again, to show this pervasive manipulation of the images of black people. Look at the ring in the nose. This time it's an attack on the image of the black woman. Nigger head tees. You get ready to go play golf. You go to the pro shop, pick up some tees. Look at the, again, the Sambo image of the black male on the golf tee box. Nigger blues. You go pick up a piece of sheet music in the music store, and here is a distortion of the image of the black people. Darky toothpaste. This is being sold today by Colgate Palmolive Company in Asia. This toothpaste right here. And here's the article that talks about it. Sale of Darky toothpaste in the Far East. This is published in the Atlanta Constitution this year.
February 17th, 19th?
Yes. And they say that they are going to keep selling it because they don't have any black people to object to it in the Far East, and it doesn't have that meaning to those people over there. But here we have in 1986 the projection of these same darky images.
Colgate Palmolive.
Yes. There's the the article. Here are postcards that used to be sent through the United States mail. This is only one example. Again, for people who are on the bottom, who need strength and images and so forth, but to turn to the culture for messages about itself and pick up only these kinds of messages, which I guess travelers felt looked, well, this is local color. Somebody traveling to Alabama, Mississippi, stops into the grocery store or drugstore, picks up a postcard like this, or like this, or like this. Now what this says, if you can see the whole image, it says, a coon trees a possum.
A coon tree.
A coon tree's a
Tree's
possum.
a possum.
Yeah,
Okay.
see, there's a possum up in the tree. So this black man, of course, they used to call black
Coon.
people coons. So, crop of wool in Dixieland. See, making fun of black hair. And this one I thought was really interesting. Here's a little girl who, if that took place, and it surely did, teaching her grandfather to read, but the way this artist drew this postcard, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner it says, Grandpa's embarrassment. Instead of treating it as a positive. It gets turned and twisted as a negative. The play on the stereotypical sexuality of the black female, see. Again, it's hard to...
But gee, I wish I could find
Well,
this.
there's another part on the top of this slide that you're not able to see. It says, love is wicked, bad, and bum.
Let's go up to the top of the slide, please.
Yeah, it says love is wicked, bad, and bum, you see? But gee, I wish I could find me some. Now, if you put that in context with the stereotype of the black female as just lusting after males and so forth, and that justifies her rape and attacks on her person and things like that, then you begin to see that these are not little innocent things over time.
But in fact, who were the, quote, perpetrators, if you will, of lust?
Well,
during slavery?
well, we know that was the white owners that did that. It certainly was not the blacks who were doing that.
So how much, once again, how much?
So that's that twisting, that's denial of reality, perceptual distortion, delusions of grandeur, projection of blame. That's that whole set of syndromes that I call mental illness syndrome, and it's typical of racist behavior.
Okay.
Okay, this is a soap ad. This was a textbook that was used in the schools in 1896. 10 little niggers. You know, this is what I mean. Remember when I said pervasive? These things, these images were pervasive. They were and still are pervasive, and no group of people in history has ever had this happen to them.
Bombardment of negative images.
Never in the history of humankind can you document another period of time where one group was targeted with so many of these different kinds of assaults on the self-image. Here, for example, is a beautiful movie actress, blocking on her name right now, but this is what she actually looked like. What I wanted to show you was what she had to do in order to get work. Okay. Josephine Bailey, that's who it is. Okay, look at what she has to do to get work. See, she has to dress up as a minstrel and then play these parts that are fabricated for black people. Little black boys are taught what they're supposed to do when they grow up. They're supposed to shine little white boy shoes. So these are some of the little movies. Remember Spanking, Our Gang, and so forth, and you look at what was done with the images there.
Now, I'm going to say this. I might get in trouble for this with a daycare, but...
Okay. Why not?
I'm not going to call a name. I'm not going to call a name. But you know who you are.
Okay.
All right. I went to a daycare one day, and I saw these children looking at buckwheat and the whatever gang, and I said, "Wait a minute, this is not going to get it here."
That's right.
And people might not understand.
Yeah.
They say, "Well, what harm is that going to do?"
Yeah, it's going to do a lot of harm, and I'll try to say more about that. But you don't see other people doing that to their children. If they have comedy in the white community, they have other things to balance it off. In the black community, we have had, until the Cosby Show, really, we've had almost nothing positive that you could turn to on TV. And those images do have an effect on, they get embedded in the minds of children. Why would somebody, you don't see Jewish people running around making light of the Holocaust. And they say, well, you know, let's have everybody wear the uniforms, prison uniforms that we used to wear just for fun. It isn't, there's nothing funny about that, you know, and so why should our pain be funny to ourselves and to others, of course, but least of all, our pain shouldn't be funny to us. And it isn't funny to me at all. Okay. People say, well, that was way back in the old ages. What about 1985, 86, the 80s? This was an article that was done in one of the magazines, and it asked the question, does TV have a secret formula for black? And look at who we're looking at here, Jefferson and his wife, and in my opinion, one of the worst shows on TV in terms of black image. You know, it's an assault on the image of the black middle class. You know, here's a man who's supposed to be at the top. You know, you got him a little dinky apartment in New York and a couple cleaning establishments, and he's a complete clown. You know, that's the black middle class in the eyes of the secret formula people. Now let's see.
And you don't get seven cleaners being a clown.
No, you don't. No, you don't. And you don't keep them.
I mean, it takes very bright people to even get
to do that, but you get no image of him as a bright man. You see, now let's look at this question: what is the secret formula? And it hits at something that's very important in television. Here are the writers who write the stories on most primetime TV for black people. In other words, it's mostly not black people who create the shows for black people. You know, that it's only been recently that we've had a measure of control over our images in TV with such shows as The Cosby Show, where...
So you have to keep referring to The Cosby Show. I wonder why is that?
Because it's about the only example I can come up with. Yeah, and that Poussaint, Dr. Al Poussaint and Bill Cosby together have a great degree of editorial control over the show. Remember what happened when Richard Pryor had editorial control over his show? It went off the air in less than 8 weeks it was supposed to have. His special was beautiful. I mean, he was doing some things there that were just incredible. But it didn't last, you know, and other things lasted. You know, Flip Wilson lasted as long as he would dress up like Geraldine, and he became really bizarre. So here's what these writers think is funny. See, and their image, my needs are not being met, but their needs are being met when they see the Jeffersons and his wife. Remember the typical, remember Shirley Temple before?
Their needs to what? Their needs of what?
To repeat these images of degraded black folk.
Okay.
Here, until the Cosby Show came along, the only effective father for a black child on TV was a white father, in different strokes. And Little Arnold here has his white father. They were adopted, and so that was the positive male image for, you know, look at the subliminal message that's sent out to the whole black community at that time, given the alternative. Here's Flip Wilson. That became very popular. So these are the kinds of images that the writers like. The Globetrotters as a comedy. Fred Sanford, you know, Sanford and Son. JJ, you can see how happy they were. You remember Step and Fetch It? What's the difference? So here we are in the 70s and 80s, and these still are the images that are being given to us. Something didn't fall. Oh, yes. I was trying to show here that these images were not innocent, because if you go back in history, you find that if you allow people to twist the images of any group of population, it's easy to manipulate dominant populations to do negative things, as happened with the Ku Klux Klan, and we can see from some of these pictures that these were serious matters indeed. And then we asked the question about television, of course. What are our children doing? They're learning while they're laughing. But what are the lessons that they're learning? Here's an example, celebrity dolls. Look at the dolls that our children are picking up. Remember those TV shows we just looked at? Look, there's Fred Sanford. There's a JJ doll. You know, maybe an E.T. doll, an OJ. In other words, children take these images from TV and they become their real life images. There are people who spend their time doing academic analysis of media and messages. And people like Dan Shore here, for example, warn us that even on the news, the messages may be mixed, and we should be careful. And this is just for everybody, not just for blacks, but for everybody. There are people who have written books about this, especially the medium, the TV medium. Subliminal seduction would be a case in point. For example, on the cover of that book, the word sex is written in the ice cubes on the glass, and it's subliminally received but not really received, and that's one of the ways to attract
word sex
it actually appears as you know, as shadows in the ice cubes in the glass.
Now, how does the mind work with that? Can you explain that?
Yes, that I've had it demonstrated to me with an old movie where there must be 20 years old that they've known about how you could easily influence people to lean in the direction of certain information by flashing subliminal images on TV. In this case, trying to help a person determine whether Another one was thinking of a triangle, a square, or I think in a rectangle, a circle, a square, and a triangle. I guess that's what they were talking about. So I'm thinking of one of these things. What is it? And I found myself saying triangle. And then the guy backed it up. He said, most people said triangle. He backed the film up. He said, most people said triangle. Now let me show you why you said triangle. And what was happening was when the instructions were being given on the film, the triangle was flashing fast enough for me to pick it up with my brain, but not with my eyes.
Ah, okay.
Okay. And so I actually got the message and didn't know where it had come from or even that I had gotten it. And I actually had done exactly what he said.
So is the subliminal message more powerful at times than the obvious, the overt?
Well, I've heard people say that. I wish I were expert enough to know in detail what that's all about. But I suspect that it may be more powerful than the actual message. And
because you aren't even aware.
Because people aren't aware of what's coming at them. So this means that we have to educate a whole generation, especially if you have the capacity to manipulate images consciously, and if you have the history of having done so intentionally, then it becomes critical that the people who are victimized by this most become critical viewers. And you only become critical viewers by being aware of it. Remember, your mind cannot be programmed if you are aware that someone may be trying to program your mind.